everybody. Welcome to Work 4.0, the podcast. I'm Sydney Campos here, Chief of Staff of Mattermore, and I'm here with the brilliant COO, co-founder of Mattermore, Matt Schenker. And today we had a really fun session describing Work 4.0 and really the intention of the show and what we hope to bring to you every single time we meet. We're so grateful that you're here with us, and we can't wait to play.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the first episode of the Work 4.0 podcast. We are near the end of New York Tech Week here. We've had a busy and amazing series of events we've been popping all around to, and Sydney and I decided that this would be a good morning to sit down and talk to you all and introduce you to this awesome podcast we're really excited about.
Welcome, everyone. I like that, Matt, you described it as a campfire. You know, I asked you a while ago, like, what's really the vision for this? You know, what are we doing? And you're like, this is a campfire. Imagine everybody gathered around. Let's imagine a beautiful nature spot somewhere nourishing and just where we go to recharge and regenerate and refuel. And we're hanging out with our favorite friends who happen to be genius leaders and experts and creators who are imagining the future that we wish existed. And we're gathered around this campfire and we're sharing dreams and we're sharing vision of what we want and what we want to be creating and how we want to be working, collaborating together, and really how we want to be living. So welcome.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? I mean, and so much of that relays into the story of why this podcast is called what it is. It's like the story of where we've been, how humans came to be, how our civilization came to be, and who we are. And when I think about the human story, that like huddling up of people and sharing stories and sharing wisdom is so core to who we are. Like some of my favorite moments in my life are like at a festival, not necessarily at the show, but then like back at the campsite with friends, like huddled around. And even if a campfire's not going, it has that like campfire energy. Or like out camping with friends or at a camp and there's a campfire and you're telling stories. And there's like a warmth and a togetherness and a fun and just exploration around that. And that's what I want this to be. It's not like serious. We're not here to try to sell you on anything. If you want to explore stuff with us as a business, cool. If you don't, also cool. We're just glad that you're here at our campfire with us.
It's actually the original technology. I forget who I heard say that a long time ago.
What's really beautiful about that actually is it's like a convergence of two original technologies depending on your perspective.
Circle and the fire?
Well, the fire and story.
Maybe also a circle of people.
Sure. I mean, is the circle the original invention? It's like
I call it
before
a
the
trinity.
Big Bang, maybe everything was just a circle.
It's a trinity of technology. We just coined that, you guys.
But when you think about it, like the greatest machine that we know of in the universe is the human mind. And the thing that has allowed us to spur on and be so innovative is our ability to utilize language. We can imagine, we can pass down knowledge, history, engineering from one generation to the next across the globe. That sharing of information is what allows us to work together, which is crucial. Because if you go back in evolution, before any concept of work ever existed, you had human beings that popped up on the scene somewhere around 300,000 years ago, at least. That's like around where the oldest remains are that we can find, where there were Homo sapiens. And if you were to take one of those Homo sapiens at that time, after millions of years of evolution and billions of years of the universe expanding, suddenly there were these Homo sapiens sapiens. And we have every indication to believe that, based on what we can tell from the remains, they were structurally nearly identical to us, very similar, to the point where if you could take a bundle of infants, of newborns born at that time, and time travel them to the present and have them be adopted and then raised by a current modern family, they would just seem like a modern human. And so then that brings up this question, like, well, interesting. So that's like the hardware we're all walking around with. What was the environment that led to that evolution of that hardware, the development of it? because we're still carrying that same ancient hardware. And a crucial piece of that was somewhere along the lines we got this like burst of consciousness, however you want to believe that came, whether it was from mushrooms or a divine creator, or maybe it was language itself. But we started to develop this like carving into stone and this verbal technology where we could talk to each other, which is crucial because one human being doesn't stand a chance against a lion, tiger, bear, oh my, but 10 might and 100 certainly do. So our ability to survive depended most on our ability to be together. And to do that, we developed language to allow us to do that in more intricate ways, to develop tools. And the first tool that we created was language. The next tool that we created, we had things like fire. So then we could cook. And now suddenly we could eat more things. And so like there's something really beautiful about this idea of a campfire. It's that story technology that is crucial to our development as humans. And fire, which is crucial to this story around where does work come from and how did human civilization develop?
I gotta go back. You said something about the most important technology being the mind.
Hit me.
I don't know about that.
The caveat I would add is mind includes the nervous system.
What about the heart?
I would say it's part of it. There are more neurons.
Most important?
There are neurons in the heart, so the heart is part of the nervous system.
But isn't that the most important?
Where do you draw the line that separates the heart from the brain?
I mean, I guess nothing's separate if you're really in your body.
Right. So the amazing technology is the ability to process energy and information that the human body is. Which is
okay. This sounds better,
right?
Yes, I
so
get
like
it.
that's the way to frame it. The like scientific way to say it would be the brain.
Okay.
But like if we're being real,
Let's
it's like
get the
it's the
update.
human nervous system.
There we
like,
go.
That hardware is amazing.
I'm on board
the
with
energy
this.
we're able to vibe with and process. You call it
Yes.
energy, information,
Superhuman.
data. It is miraculous. We're
Yes.
trying to create it, but even the most advanced computers, nothing compared to a human
Yeah.
nervous system as far as the amount of data we're able to process visually, auditorially, sensory.
Absolutely.
verbally.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really missing for me because it's so much of our world is so hyper focused on this analytical outlook, right? Framework of the mind and the mental and science we love. And you're a behavior scientist. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'm a little bit more on the other side of, energy and more like multidimensionality and this awareness of, yes, we're so much more than, even our body. We're energy. We're an energy field. We're an energetic system. And I love that people are waking up to this more,
Yeah.
that it's like, wait a minute, we are feeling beings. And how do we create a sense of safety, centeredness, groundedness, trust within ourselves so that we can really connect? We're like in this crisis of leadership, which we'll talk more about, of course. But I mean, underneath that, I feel it's like the crisis of connection where people don't feel like they belong. People don't feel like they know where to show up. They don't feel like they're connected to a purpose. They don't know who they are. These are big questions, right? And there's a lot of hopelessness attached. And when I think of what we're creating with this Work 4.0 platform podcast, even with Mattermore, and how I even position what we're doing as a team, my personal connection to it is, it's like, how are we solving the connection crisis in the world? How are we really helping people to feel like they belong, like they matter, and that they can develop the capacity? It's a nervous system capacity. It's an embodiment capacity to feel like you can be present, to really connect, to belong, to have a purpose.
Yeah, it's a massive disconnection crisis. And within there, actually, it really roots down to the point that you actually brought up between the mind and the heart. So the mind is not the brain, right? And the brain is not just the gooey thing in your head. The brain is your entire nervous system. And so the mind is actually a creation linguistically that we
Cool.
create verbally. And we tend to over prioritize it. And that's part of our disconnection. We're disconnected from our wisdom. We're disconnected from the deepest, truest understanding of who we are and how our hardware is wired. and what that means about how we have to optimize the software we put on that hardware. And ultimately the root of that is wisdom. So what's wisdom? So this philosopher I interviewed a long time ago named Tom Morris, he has this great definition of wisdom that I love, which is embodied insight for living.
Wow.
So it's not just things that you know intellectually, it's embodied insight. And it's not that, we're ephemeral beings and that it's fluffier to think of ourselves that way. It's that your nervous system has these neurons all throughout your body. So your body has access to way more data than your verbal intellectual mind ever could. And so it's actually the most grounded, deepest truth that we are embodied beings who think, not thinking beings who sometimes feel. And so that's important. And I don't want to go too deep down the embodiment rabbit hole, which I know we can get into.
Come on my podcast for that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love that. So why don't we talk to the people a little bit about what the hell Work 4.0 is?
Matt, what is Work 4.0?
Are you throwing it back to me?
Besides the campfire, what is it? What's going on here?
So the campfire is, just naming how we want this to feel. And we just named a few of the threads that go into that idea. Great. And we've talked about our evolutionary history. So for 97% of the time Homo sapiens are on this planet, at least, we were hunter-gatherer nomads. It's how we developed. So everything about how we operate, our oxytocin and attachment system, developed to keep us together with the tribe so we could survive. Our dopamine system was about seeking out new foods, new partners, new lands. Why did we have to seek out new lands? Because we didn't necessarily know how to cultivate land for agriculture. And so if you can't agriculturally develop lots of food to farm and you stay in one place for too long, use up all your resources and you die. So our dopamine system is about seeking out adventure and novelty. And so it's just understanding how we developed helps give us wisdom about some of those key pieces. And I say 97% because roughly, 300,000 years, and then roughly around 10,000 years ago, maybe 14,000, maybe longer, depending on who you ask. But around there, we start to see agriculture. We start to see civilizations set into a particular place. And with that came a whole new way of living. Now, the way that we operated started to develop these economies, mostly around farming and barter trade for thousands of years. And within that structure, what work was about cultivating food and creating useful things for people together. Importantly, we did that together. The workforce of yours was your family. The family unit was your workforce. People lived within the same place for most of their lives, surrounded not just by their immediate family, but their extended family. And people weren't necessarily working all the time. When they were working, it was hard work. It was labor intensive. And they had this sense of community. And since so much of it was connected to farming, there was also this deep connection to the seasons. And so there was a little bit more structure that was aligned around our economy and then the way that we just lived our day-to-day life. And that's how work was for a really long time.
Is that 1.0?
That's Work 1.0, the agrarian age.
Got it.
So then we get to the Industrial Revolution, which we've all heard about in school and talked about with trains and steam engines and assembly lines.
Trange. I like that. Change.
Trange. What a strange word that would be.
That was cool.
And there's a really beautiful story, though, within the birth of the Industrial Age or the Industrial Revolution that I really love. Have you ever heard the story of William of Orange?
I like it. No.
Okay.
I just like his name.
All right.
New Jersey?
So William...
Is it Orange, New Jersey?
I don't know. Somebody
place.
will have to look that up and let us know.
Okay.
Any New Jersey experts, get back to us, please. So William of Orange was born a Dutch prince. Okay, so this is the end of the Middle Ages. There was this cool thing happening in Europe. One of these cool things that started to happen was people were getting really, really frustrated with the system of how things were going down. So often when we think of the Middle Ages, we think
that
of
sounds familiar.
right? So there's this really cool story. I really think it's relevant to right now, which is when we think of the Middle Ages, we often think it's like this dark period of time where like innovation really wasn't happening. But it was. Like universities popped up during the Middle Ages. You had windmills that were created. There were all sorts of innovations still happening. It wasn't that power, innovation, and wealth weren't happening. It's that power and wealth got centralized. There was a contraction with the fall of the Roman Empire. Like the Greeks and the Romans, there was this like free flowing of ideas, and then there was innovation like aqueducts that was changing people's lives. And as that empire fell, power and wealth just accumulated to the Catholic Church and then to like feudal lords, right? So there was like this centralization. And then there's this interesting like rebellion that happened in the Netherlands. At the time, the Spanish Empire and the Habsburgs and the Catholic Church were the main powers. And this like group of people, the Dutch, were like, fuck this. We are done with that. Like, they revolted, and it got gory, like 80 years war. But then what the Dutch created was the first republic, the first capitalistic republic. The very first
stock market.
Corporation, the stock market.
Yeah.
And so this was in the 1500s.
It's all coming back. Wow.
Right? And so William of Orange was a prince that was born in that area. But like at that point, the Orange family, they were kind of like the modern monarchy in England, right? It was more symbolic. Really, things were decided on a more ground level on like what we might look at and call like a legislature today. And what was happening was there was this like real valuing of diversity. Exiles from different communities would flock to the Netherlands. Descartes left France and headed to the Netherlands. And so like cogito ergo sum and like his discourse on method, which became the foundation for the scientific method, that happened in the Dutch Republic. The invention of the telescope, the invention of the microscope. So the invention of like the first corporation, the stock market. All of that was happening in this first republic. And they had a mighty military, they had this navy. And the big thing that allowed them to do that was windmills and water mills. So this technology was booming.
Maybe a little colonization also.
Right? Well, they were ruthless on the seas, right? They were ruthless. So that's not it wasn't a fully pretty story, but there was a real beauty in terms of the Netherlands was just like 1.5 million to 2 million people who decided that the most powerful systems of their age, the Habsburgs, the Spanish Empire, the Catholic Church, they weren't going to live under their rule anymore. They wanted to do some things differently. And then amazingly, they totally changed the world stage. They developed the greatest navy and the greatest economy, and now they were setting the rules. And that was from groups of people that decided to support each other. And so a really interesting story, right? To the point where they became the envy. Like France wanted to invade because they were like, no, you're like poisoning the ideas of our people. They're not going to respect the monarchy. And that messed up some things. The English were like, hey, like we have this like Catholic king we're not really liking, and James II, like we really like how they're doing stuff down in the Netherlands. And so William of Orange had married Mary, who was from the English monarchy line. And so a bunch of English lords invited William of Orange to invade England. And they basically walked him into becoming the king. And that's William and Mary. Now, under William and Mary, as they were ruling, you know what happened? In England, they had coal and metalworking. And they became the center of innovation, the center of the economy for the world stage. Because like the Dutch didn't continue to evolve. So their water mills and windmills like couldn't compete with coal. And then in the 1680s, you had people like Sir Isaac Newton. You had John Locke that set these foundations. Then in 1698, coming from coal to be able to get some of the water out of these coal mines was this guy who invented the steam engine. The birth of the Industrial Revolution.
There's that train.
That train coming. So like that's where the steam engine came from. it came from like England trying to learn from like this first capitalistic republic and like this free flowing of ideas. And all of this came from like the wake of the Middle Ages, like people frustrated from the power structures that had developed there. And a few people, a small group of people then birthed this change that had these huge echoes that now structure the world we know today. And so work 2.0 became the industrial age, which we know with the steam engine and manufacturing and people flocking to urban cities because now that's where jobs were and where you could get money. And now there was a little bit of residential mobility, but still you had the nuclear family. And everything we know about the industrial age happened there. And that's work 2.0.
Okay, we're still only at 2.0.
That's 2.0.
What? Okay, we got a 2x. What's happening here? I'm like, what's 3.0 again?
So 2.0.
Information.
So work 3.0 is the computer age or the information age.
Information, okay.
Right? And so
High-tech.
something really interesting happens with that. At that point, globalization had been spurring onward. Really, it was just amplified.
Can we just pause 1 second?
Hit us.
Matt, you're like a data download. Sometimes when you're talking, I'm just like, oh my God, like this is so how do you remember? I remember the stock market from like 20 years ago in high school. Like, you're like, anyways, I'm learning so much. This is awesome. And something I'm curious about is like, it sounds like from what you described is work 4.0 was like, it's a huge span of time, right? We're talking about a huge, like lengthy phase,
Work
right?
1.0.
1.0, right?
Yeah, work 1.0.
And then even 2.0, pretty lengthy.
A few hundred years.
And then 3.0, the information age, if we're looking at computing, maybe we include the internet in that,
80
that's
years.
not very long.
It's been 80
That's
years.
fast.
Yeah, so
Okay.
a key thing to highlight is you go back 200 years, the average lifespan is still around 40 years.
Right.
So people's lives 200 years ago, the way they were living is more similar to the way people lived 800 years ago than it is today. So innovation didn't just get faster, it gets exponentially faster.
Yeah.
And so that's a key thing for us to understand is there's a reason we feel so overwhelmed today. There's a reason that we feel like things are so different and fast-paced and so many crises happening. And it's for two big reasons. One is technology has been innovating so rapidly. We have not been able to adapt as rapidly socioculturally. Our biology moves really, really slow, but so does our cultural development, our patterns for how we relate with ourselves, each other, and our technology. So we've lost our sense of agency within our relationship to our technology. It has come to dominate us. It has drastically changed our sense of structure. Rather than knowing our neighbors and living most of our lives in one place around family members who could support us, loneliness is the highest it's ever been. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide because we are overwhelmed with information and disconnected from a sense of community, which is crucial for our hardware to be able to process stress.
Yeah, they go back to the UK. They had a ministry of loneliness, right?
Yeah.
This is like a governmental, like a state structure addressing a crisis of loneliness.
Yeah. Vivek Murthy has been our U.S. Surgeon General twice. He was the U.S. Surgeon General under Obama. And when he left office, he said he was going to leave to solve and study the greatest crisis facing humanity. He wasn't talking about the opioid crisis, and he wasn't talking about a virus. He was talking about loneliness.
Babies die if they don't have human contact within the first few moments and, those initial breaths. Like, we die. We die without connection.
Yeah, it's our deepest need. It's how we're
Yeah.
wired. So, like, one piece is like, okay, our whole structure for just how we relate and live has been kind of just thrown off, and those norms shattered, and we're sort of just a little lost and fragmented. We don't have places where we really go to connect with one another and like have collective effervescence or explore the meaning of life and just connect with one another in real life, like what people might call third spaces, or there were religious institutions, or like your neighborhood cookout. Like that stuff just doesn't happen nearly as much anymore. So that's one big piece, just like the change of our patterns. The other big piece is the way information is shared. So with the birth of the computer age in the 70s and 80s, for the first time we went from like having 3 TV channels to now having unlimited TV channels, and now any article that was ever written ever is available all the time, anytime. And so for most of human existence, our ratio to available seconds of attention that we have and content that we could pay attention to was like this. And then in like the 80s, like it broke. Now we're like surrounded by infinite content. So of course we're overwhelmed because we don't have structure for how we're supposed to like relate with this information and this technology, and we're overloaded and overwhelmed. So at this time where we have more things competing to capture our attention, we have less skills for regulating our stress and attention. So of course we feel overwhelmed.
I'm just laughing a little bit. I love everything you're saying, and I'm so on board, and I get it. But then what comes to mind as you're speaking is literally like the meme of, you know, like how addicted people are to TikTok, and they want like a 1 minute instant gratification, like really intense nervous system, like dysregulating video, but it's about nervous system healing.
Right.
It's like, help me, but it's still like crazy.
Right. And a lot of us don't even understand why we do that. But like when you're running, and you're running and like norepinephrine and noradrenaline is surging through your body, if you set a milestone for yourself and then you go to reach that milestone, a little dopamine goes through your system. You know what that dopamine helps you do? It down regulates all that noradrenaline going through your body.
Yeah.
And so like we go to dopamine to help us cope with this overwhelming stress in our bodies. So like what we really need is co-regulating time with other nervous systems and like sunlight and space and quiet.
Yeah.
But since we're not getting that to process all this stuff that's surging, it's like we're like, oh God, I need a little bit of dopamine in between this call. Let me just go and like scroll through Instagram. We don't even realize that that's just our nervous system trying to find ways to just regulate the stress in our bodies.
There's something else coming up through this like trajectory you're painting so beautifully of like the progression, evolution of humanity through these different ages and really identities. And I wonder what you think about this. You know, I can't help but name like there has been an evolution not only of our embodiment over this time, right? Like we've moved out of like basic needs, survival, hunter-gatherer consciousness to this more like evolved, I call it consciousness or intelligence, where we're able to build, you know, quantum computing processors and be engineers and like build incredibly innovative infrastructure. And I mean, the brain, the nervous system, the body, like we've evolved into these really masterful creators that are capable of such fantastic, I mean, art and beauty and also like resource. I mean, I imagine what comes to mind is like, you know, I was really feeling this last couple of days actually, like just, I think we really have everything we need, like wired within us and even just within our world and all the resource available to create what we really want, you know, on every different level of society and every different level of our experiences, even the infrastructure. But the thing that's in the way of really experiencing that or achieving it is like building the capacity to effectively collaborate and communicate, to actually develop those soft skills. Like we have the mental intelligence, we have all of these like visions, we can be highly analytical and can be engineers and all of these things. But then what I find to be really the biggest challenge, and I think this is a part of Work 4.0 as I relate to it, is like, okay, we have the information age, we have the super intelligence, we have all the different like building blocks. But what's missing are the soft skills and like the evolution of, you know, it's like, I wonder what the term is, or maybe we're like creating a new term. Maybe that's something we can explore. It's like the behaviors, the habits, the mindsets, the energetic orientation, the consciousness, the emotional intelligence. You know, we talk about artificial intelligence, but what about emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, this ability to regulate your nervous system as this highly complex being, to really understand and know oneself, to know your triggers, to know your traumas, to be able to effectively relate to the people that you're meant to collaborate with and build these new worlds with. Yeah.
I think of this as the difference between resourcing skills and functional skills. Or you could call them relationship skills or functional skills. We used to call them soft skills, but they're really hard to learn.
I don't like the soft skills thing.
And when there have been surveys through the last like couple decades asking CEOs of the Fortune 500, like, what skills do you really want of people coming out of college? And about 10 years ago, that really transformed to like critical thinking, ability to communicate ideas, ability to communicate, empathy, and collaborate with others, because those were the skills that were lacking. And there's a, I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name, but
it's in that Rolodex somewhere.
Yeah, I was looking to see if I could find it, but he was the minister. He was the minister. Blah, 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 blah. I think he was the minister of something at the London School of Economics. And a few years ago, he had this beautiful quote, and it was that in the past, work was about the muscles, and right now, work has been about the mind. Right? Like Steve Jobs' line, like the computer is the bicycle for the mind. It made information and thinking, communicating ideas cheaper, more efficient, and more widespread. So then it was about the mind. But in the future, work will be about the heart. And so there's something that we forget, which is those heart skills or those hard skills, those relational skills, they have to be developed. And so I hear you naming a few different things. One is we've really lost those skills. And there's a reason for that. It's because the way that we have designed our societal systems, the ways that we relate to each other and the ways that we distribute technologies and societal resources. And that's a problem. And then there are kind of two different directions you can take the conversation. One is, how do we transform the systems that structure how we relate to each other, our environments, people's families, their communities, their schools, healthcare, government, the judicial system, our workplaces. It's like those systems can help people develop those skills. They can help people better develop the skills for connecting with themselves and to each other. And also, there's this piece of, how do I individually just develop those skills? And there's power in both of those conversations. And they feed each other. And you can start in either place. You can say, like, okay, how do I change in just my life? How can I change some of the stuff around me? And some of that is like, okay, well, when I'm working, like I'm not going to work in a room with my phone or something like that. Or I'm not going to have the TV on. I'm going to have some like hard boundaries like that. But also it's like, you could get outside and see sunlight first thing in the morning. You could spend some time meditating to develop those skills. You can journal. You can do some embodiment practices. You can build up personal power, and you can transform the systems around you that impact societal power. Because it's true. There is an injustice happening. Prosperity is here. It's just not evenly distributed. Right? Like the richest people today have a quality of life that they can live that is unimaginable to people hundreds of years ago. But also the technologies anyone really has available to them are amazing and sort of unimaginable. So like you can build a really great life, and you can transform those systems to be more just. And you can't do that if you are overwhelmed and feel like you have no capacity. So you can expand your capacity, and you can transform the laws and regulations and workplaces and healthcare and schools. You can advocate for both, but you can't just focus on transforming the systems. You can't just argue with people about what's unjust. You also have to be building up your own personal capacity.
We can put all the energy into building these new systems, and if the underlying consciousness or behaviors that are going to play in the system don't change, it won't matter.
Yeah, and there's wisdom to gain from looking at the birth of the Industrial Revolution. The things that create massive change come from a few people who are bold enough to think that they can create that change. And it comes from groups of people. This bullshit story of the like individual hero transforming things. Look at anybody throughout history. Like Elon Musk had his brother. You have Warren Buffett, who had Charlie Munger. Like Alexander the Great had like legions of people, and his mother like advocating hard for him. Like you can't find a single person that we prize as an innovator who's like a titan, an individual hero we think of, that didn't have clear strategy around their support system. It's groups of people that create change. And so that's the piece with like this modern Middle Ages that we're in. we have to understand that we're at a point where like the middle class is shrinking, and people have this sense of overwhelm. Stress is at its peak. Chronic disease is still so pervasive.
Depression, anxiety.
Depression's the leading cause of disability
Yes.
worldwide. Rates of anxiety are going up the younger you go down the totem pole. And so what you're seeing is people are feeling less and less resourced, right? And we can change that. We can change that by creating, empowering groups of people, and it doesn't take everybody. Like, empowering groups of people who can resource and regenerate one another. And that is a design solution. One of the other things a lot of people don't realize is through this computer age, we have gone from typewriter to computer to internet to AI, rapid rate of change in 80 years. We've also had this amazing rate of innovation with behavior science. So when you look at elite sports teams, they have really strategic coaching and feedback and ways that they structure their culture, the patterns of how they relate. And all of that is rooted in behavior science. So it's not a knowledge gap problem. We have all the research we need around how do we actually create groups of people that can resource each other, that can sustainably take on hard things without burning out, that can become more of themselves, that can expand their well-being while creating value within a business. How do we do that? It's not a fucking mystery. It's a design challenge that we understand how to do, and the key place to do that is at work. We need work now more than ever, which is kind of a contrarian take, but when you think about it, humans have always worked, and humans will always work. Work is just people coming together to make useful or interesting things, which we have always done. It's innately wired within us.
Is it work or purpose? It's contribution, and it's like, why are you alive? You're here to make something. You're here to contribute something to the whole.
Yeah, that's what work is. Work is
Where does
the
that
way
word
we
come
contribute.
from? Where does the word come from?
Let's find out.
I need to
Let's
know right now.
Let's find out live.
Like, where does this word come from? Because I feel like it's overly used, and I'm like, what are we actually saying?
All right.
We need the etymology download now.
We're getting etymology live, people.
I also like to spell it with the E.
I think it's a German word.
Like
I think it has a German root.
As is with most English. I'm really curious because today when I think of Work 4.0, what really resonates more with me is like creation, vision, purpose, meaning, contribution, like aliveness, vitality, like your art. Like my work, I want to feel like art. I want it to feel like my contribution from my deepest essence to humanity, my legacy, the thing that I would do anyway, with money not being an object, with, it's like, why are we alive? Okay, tell me.
All right, you're going to love this. It comes from a Germanic word, which means to make.
There you go.
So and it's ultimately like when you think about all of what humans are wired to do, there's all this research on motivation. Like there are things we're intrinsically wired to want to do. And when you don't understand that, you default to just threatening and bribing people. And so when we're really honest with ourselves, a lot of what we do is us either bribing or threatening ourselves, or we just do it because of inertia. Why are you staying in that job that you hate? Well, like, I'm here, I've been doing it, and like, it just seems like a lot for me to think of doing something else. Or like we wake up first thing in the morning and we like shame ourselves and we start stressing. We're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get enough sleep. Oh, I have so much to get done today. I don't have enough time to get all of that done. Oh my God, I'm going to be so upset with myself if I don't get all of that done. And now what I'm doing is I'm just like doing things in order to avoid like punishing myself with the shame of not getting that stuff done. And I just like activate myself with stress, but it doesn't have to be that way. When you talk to an artist, they say, hey, look at my work, right? So work doesn't have to be this like cold, dark, cubicled place. Work can be a place that also includes play and purpose and power and expansion, because at its core, that's what it always has been.
I like all those P words.
Those P words.
Prosperity, play, power, pleasure.
Right. Well,
so
and because those are intrinsic wirings.
Yes, that's who we are.
Right. There's that that study with kids that love to draw, and if you then start to have them trade in their drawings for gold stars,
Oh,
eventually
yeah.
they stop drawing because you've now made it smaller. Because what's really big was like they get to be in their body, right? So like I call it like the 3 C's of motivation: coherence, connection, creation. Which is like coherence. Like I want to be able to like feel my body so that I can like be in touch with all of these sensory experiences and I can make sense, like sensory. Like I want to be able to make sense of what's going on here. So like when you're drawing, like as a kid, it's just like you're connected to this sense of wonder and like fun, and you get to like touch with that excitement and like exploration. And that's inherently valuable, and you're inherently drawn to do that. You don't have to bribe a kid to draw. Or like connection. We do things to get a sense of contribution so we can feel important to other people we're around. And like creation, we're wired to like discover and express more parts of ourselves just innately. We want to do that. We want to create. When people are in crisis, we discover this the most. So when things are dark and things feel heavy, whether you're grieving, you're going through a loss, or you're just like overwhelmed with anxiety, one of the things people always end up turning to is art, like poetry, movies, music, like and making that stuff from our deepest pains, because we're wired to create. So you don't have to bribe anybody to do those things. Work can be structured in a way with purpose by understanding what people's values are. Let me understand, what do you really want out of your life? How do you become more of who you are? And how can I then connect that to what our mission is for how we're impacting people with our business? So now instead of you doing stuff at work to appease me and avoid threats and gain bribes from me, now I can support you in becoming more of who you are, connecting to that sense of purpose that you innately want, creating processes that allow people to operate within their window of tolerance so they can access coherence, and doing that by developing skills to connect with people, connecting with them, building trust with your people. Purpose, processes, people. It's that simple. Every empowering culture, any empowering workplace has those things. And the reason we're talking about work as far as the place to do this, that's any culture, whether it's a family, a classroom, a healthcare practice, a dance club, whatever the hell it is, you have those things, and it helps people unite together, become more of themselves. But we talk about work because for the modern human, other than when they spend time alone, the number one place they spend time, the number one place that they show up where other people are, is at work.
Yeah, it's a massive opportunity. Huge opportunity. I mean, it brings up like, what, first of all, thank you so much for that reminder. And I feel so connected to what we're doing. I feel really affirmed in following my guidance to be here right now. And it's like all the threads of all the years and all the things that I know we've both done and have both really dedicated ourselves to. And probably people listening, it's like, I think this is making sense, right? Like what we're saying is like resonating. It's like, okay, like it's the time of revolution, guys. We need a new way. Like let's create the culture we actually want to be a part of.
Isn't that kind of wild? Like we hopped on our first call, like when we were going through that interview cycle
in January this year.
Yeah. And like on that first call, we could tell like we were both like just talking about how we saw the world. I was asking about like your work experience, and it's like we could like see, we're like seeing some things similarly. Isn't that just sort of interesting how those like things that we care about, like you can find those people, they can like come to you. It's kind of wild that like we get to like hold this story together. It's cool that like you can find people to share in your work that do that. Like it's cool that we get to work together.
It's really nourishing. And it's like, I want this for everybody. What kind of world do we live in when everybody feels like they are supported to be themselves, to bring their really unique experience and expertise and wisdom to co-create, collaborate within a meaningful contribution that like adds more beauty and connection in the world. That's it.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen by accident. If you neglect a garden, it gets overrun with weeds. Like it's not going to be that beautiful place without relating with it in a way that allows everything to grow to its fullest beauty. And so it's the same thing with this like time of transition that we're in. Like, things aren't inherently just going to be okay. Things can get worse. Things can get harder and more challenging. And there can be a greater centralization of wealth, which I think is one of the greatest risks with AI, along with disinformation, fraud, and increasing loneliness, addiction, disorder. Those are the three biggest risks I see with AI. Like, those things are going to exacerbate. Like, NVIDIA and Microsoft and Apple are so huge. They're bigger than most countries. And they have so much power. And that's the case with a lot of these AI companies. They're owned by many of the same people. And so it's an amazing technology and there's great opportunity. One of the big points with that is because we're overwhelmed with information. And now LLMs and current AI landscape of tools, they allow us to reorganize this like overwhelming sea of information to reinstantiate our power within that relationship. But there's also a concern there because the people that are making money through that are largely already the richest people who have most of the societal power who are going to get more. The only way that we change that is empowering groups of people who can then hold those other people accountable. We have so many things to decide when it comes to regulation. When I was in college, I interned at the Virginia State Senate, and this like congressman came and people were asking him, "Hey, what do you think are going to be the biggest like legislative battles we're gonna have to fight?" He's like, "Listen, people my age who are like in the legislature today, we don't understand the internet. We don't understand social media platforms. As far as like privacy, data ownership, that's going to be your generation to have to figure out." And that was then. Like the surge of AI and wearable technology and biotech and like accessibility of the internet everywhere and just where the technology is, quantum computing, like we have way more questions. And the only way that we can explore those questions and make regulations that can structure our systems that make up what our society is in ways that enhance and empower well-being is by groups of people supporting each other to explore hard questions and make those regulations, those boundaries, those organizations together. We need that checks and balance, and that comes from groups. And it means people choosing to take responsibility. And no groups of people, no actions, no movements, no systems empower people without somebody taking responsibility for that happening. That means leaders, a rise of leadership, empowering leadership, people that choose to bring purpose and people skills and processes to whatever organizations they are responsible for structuring.
I love that you talked about coherence. That's one of my most overused words besides embodiment, or it used to be. People would make fun of me. They're like, okay, how many times are you going to say embodiment and coherence? Like,
it's
let's
such a
get over
beautiful
it.
word. It really is.
And I love how you defined it. And it reminds me, I don't know the exact quote, I should, but this one of my favorite thought leaders of all time, Barbara Marx Hubbard. She's like a brilliant, just an evolutionary philosopher, thought leader.
I've got my phone. We're going to pull it up.
And she talks about, I put this on back in the day when I would, create group programs and trainings and all around leadership and embodiment and helping people develop nervous system capacity to be present and communicate and create, And one of my favorite quotes of hers was, "It's small islands of coherence that bring order to the sea of chaos." I think that's it. Yeah,
I don't even need to look it up. That was beautiful.
I channeled it, man. But it's like, to your point, because I think some of our conditioning, especially in this age of like social media and just data oversaturation left and right, there's, talk about a values issue too. Like, we're so entrained, I know I've been really entrained to look at volume as a major marker of value and credibility, right?
Say more about that. What does that mean?
Like, the number of views on a YouTube video suddenly means it's more important, right? Like, in terms of like the value being more attributed to the volume of something versus, or, the views or the attention versus the quality.
Yeah.
Versus the actual depth, versus the actual, I guess just the depth and the meaning. And so it's like these distractions. I think it's another lens of distraction that we get to decondition ourselves from, to come back into like trusting ourselves more. Like, wait a minute, the the mind will say, wait a minute, is this thing I'm listening to important if there's only 5 views? Is this credible? But wait, my nervous system, I'm resonating with this. This is meaningful to me. This is important. This is beautiful, right? But we have so much distraction in our world that says, no, that's actually not. Listen to this person that has 1 million followers, which, by the way, a lot of times people have just fake. It's like a lot of superficiality and these distractions that kind of get in the way of us trusting this deeper knowing that's wired within our system to guide us into true resource and value that can really assist us. So what I mean to say is, for a long time I had this idea that, in order to make a better world, we need everybody on board, and actually I put an insane amount of pressure on myself to gather as many people as possible because it's a volume game, right? We need more people, more attention. That equals importance, that equals value, that equals credibility and momentum.
Yeah.
But what I've actually found, to your point, and I love that we're talking about this, is it's actually not a volume game. To move the needle, to really shift, and I mean deeply shift, like our collective systems and infrastructure and the biggest issues of inequality and inequity that we're facing now, or those are the same word, but inequality and, disenfranchisement and disempowerment happening at such mass levels. It's like, it doesn't have to take a huge group. It's these small groups, actually. It's smaller groups that are able to stabilize in the level of coherence that's needed to actually. It's like, what is that? The rising tide lifts all boats, right? So it's these small groups that can achieve these really present, coherent states that then powerfully kind of attune. I'm going to use some energetic words, but it's true. Like they attune the rest of the field, the rest of humanity, the rest of the collective consciousness to actually learn how to rise to that level as well.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah. I always think about our education system, just because I spent so long studying how the hell it developed and what the problems were, and
God bless you.
And there's a side note to that. When I went to Finland to study their education system,
the saunas
were amazing. But I asked their minister of education, I was like, how did you guys go from being the worst in the 80s to being one of the top 3 education systems in the world consistently? They say, oh, it was really simple. Actually, it was really hard, but it was really simple. We took all the research that is funded and completed in the United States that you guys don't really deploy, and we just used it. That's just a side note.
Just sitting on the shelf,
right? But when it comes to the macro structure of what we think of our modern school system, the subjects that we teach, all of that came from one civilization. It was the Prussian education model. And then they didn't run around the world telling everybody, hey, this is how you should educate people. They built a better model for education. And so the first Secretary of Education at a public school system in the United States was in Massachusetts. He went to Prussia to study their education system. Nobody had to send him content and say, hey, you should really check this out. He heard about it. He wanted to learn more. He went and learned more. And so by just focusing on what's the impact we really want to make, what's the structure and system we can build to make that happen with the people we want to do it with, and focusing on whatever that mission is, it will inherently have an impact of also inspiring others. It's that I think it's Buckminster Fuller who has the quote of you don't have to try to change the old systems. You make a new system that makes the old one obsolete. Mm-hmm. So there's that piece, but there's a bullshit myth that we fall for.
Lay it on us.
That is pervaded. It pisses me off. It's the thing that has me stand up at these conferences where these current leaders of VCs investing in AI companies and where I want to ask them. And I call it the techno-productive optimism myth. And it's this idea that if we just focus on scope and scale, getting volume of people to engage, then I'll have a whole bunch of people, and then I can focus on whatever kind of quality of impact I want to on those people. And we fall into that trap. And it's the same story that we were sold through the computer age. If you go back and look at magazine covers and newspaper stories in the 90s and early 2000s, we thought the technology, software and the internet, was going to be this massive, empowering, freeing tool. In a lot of ways it was. And in a lot of ways it hasn't been. Like for the first time ever, people in our generation aren't expected to live as long as our parents' generation because of hypertension, chronic disease, diseases of despair, meaning overdoses, suicide, cirrhosis of the liver. And so it's kind of odd. We're the most technologically advanced, and yet our well-being is getting dominated. And the root of that is us falling for that techno-productive optimism myth. The same bullshit myth that's within a lot of the conversation around AI innovation right now, which is if we just focus on communicating information faster, further, basically like getting tasks done faster, we'll be more efficient and people will create free time, and we will inherently use that free time to improve our quality of life. But we don't. We just end up working more hours in different ways and falling into the same patterns that we've been carrying and reinforced. We have to shift our focus to focus on the quality of impact from those technologies based on how they're designed and regulated, because we don't reach that like utopia, or we don't improve our well-being structurally by just making ourselves more productive. It's bullshit.
So I need you to get on all those stages, Matt, and tell the people what they need to know, because I don't know if we can rely on the people currently leading these stories to change and tell the different story.
But I don't have to get on all the stages, right?
But it would be fun.
Whoever listens to this, you can challenge some of those conversations.
Amen. Okay.
You can bring that up.
Yeah.
Anybody who hears me at one of those things, like question that. Like I hope you further question it.
We have to question it. Yes.
Right? Like little fires everywhere.
The thing that honestly, I just want more depth. I just think we're all ready for a little more depth. Like people are afraid to ask these questions because the reality is doing so, if we stop talking about productivity and like whatever, it's so safe. It's really safe. It's like the productivity thing feels really safe and familiar, and we all know where it goes. And it's even like, it's pretty boring. It's like a temporary, like superficial distraction that keeps us from actually asking the deeper questions of like, well, wait a minute, when we put that aside, like what's actually the state of the union right now? Like how are we really doing? How are our workplaces? How's our society really doing? Like how do we actually score ourselves? Like it's not looking good, guys. What's really wrong?
And there's nothing inherently wrong with productivity, right? We're fans of productivity. We want our company to be productive. And there's nothing wrong with like helping people to get stuff done faster and better, and like automating stuff that we don't like doing. Great. All for that. The point is, it just can't only be that. It has to be, okay, how do we make our business more productive? How do we get more stuff to generate more value, get more revenue, or get more users, or sell at higher price points? Whatever you need to do to continue to scale your mission. Great. Ask that question and do those things. And ask, how can we do those things in a way that also can empower our people to not burn out, to actually like enhance their well-being by being here? How can we make sure that like we are scaling and spreading our mission in a way that isn't destroying our people, and just making that also a design principle? And that doesn't have to be this massive like overflowing undertaking. It's precise changes and utilizing the right tools in the right way. It's little things done in different ways that actually end up saving you time in the long run.
Yeah.
But we see this a lot with just like managers. And when you bring on employees, and especially when you're going through changes, whether it's you're bringing on new people or you're going through a big change in your organization, you can either spend some time in the front end, like making space for people's fears and feelings and stresses that come with that, and acknowledging them. It doesn't mean someone's scared of something and say, okay, cool, don't worry, don't do it. You don't have to do that thing, but just some space to acknowledge them. Or you ignore that. You don't take any of that space. You try to just dominate and stay really aggressive. Just tell people you're going to do things. Effective management is me just telling you things loudly, and then not listening to anything you say in response. What you end up doing is spending more time in the back end managing problematic behaviors and replacing employees. More time than you would have spent in the front end just having those conversations a little bit differently, structuring the ways those conversations happen a little bit differently.
Started to get a little heated there for a minute.
Get heated. Bring the fire. We're at the campfire. Throw it in.
I love how you brought it home. And Yeah, of course we love to be productive. And like, I personally really look forward to in outlets like this, in conversations like this, in the conversations that are sure to emerge from this community that we're creating around a new way, work 4.0, you know, what are we creating instead? What's new? And just like the opportunity to explore more depth and to get real about, you know, what are the problems? What are the challenges? And not just to stay in that, but to really together get creative about the solutions and the resolutions. And what I love is like the exciting, like really unique, authentic ways that teams all over the world, given their different contexts and different resources, are going to come up with so many cool new ways of forming organizations, their processes, their design. I mean, it's like business can be, it's like the ultimate vehicle of creativity and authenticity if we allow it to be, if we orient to it that way. And it's like, it's an alchemical vehicle for just like really getting to know our true selves. And that's how I've kind of oriented to that through like my coaching practice. I'm sure you've done so similarly, and therapy and all the trainings and the things that we just love to do. And it's like, we have this opportunity to really get to know ourselves, to know what we're made of, and then to like really connect with other people who are also really open to being themselves and learning what it takes, the capacity that it takes to develop, to be comfortable, you know, to be yourself. And I have to share, like, we have to get this woman on the podcast. She's so cool. She's investing. Her whole fund's thesis is about investing in empathy.
This is someone you met this week during Tech Week?
Yes, and she's so cool. Lily at Atypical Ventures. We got to get her on. Lily. She's so cool. And
awesome.
But to your point around like, you know, I think we were skirting around it a little bit without naming it, and it's just, I have to say, like, another layer of this transition that we're in that like brings up maybe some feelings of like, what do we do? And this is scary and hopeless, and it's a big ask.
Yeah.
You know, we're like, in terms of leaving the volume and these different ways of quantifying and all the different layers of business that we like measure success with numbers. But like, how effective is that really, right? Like, we need new measures of success. We need new benchmarks.
That only works if you're measuring the right things, right? So a big problem within our education system and our healthcare system is we optimize for what we can measure because it becomes tangible, so we can build strategy around it. But if you're not measuring the right things, then that's not super helpful. That's where like the positive psychology movement came from, of like, oh, we've spent so much time just measuring the bad stuff and what creates disorder. We don't really know a lot about like what actually creates fulfillment, health, and happiness. Let's study more of like what actually creates the health and the happiness. And so like, we need to be able to utilize these tools to wrap more data around the stuff that matters, so that we can create better strategies for being not just more productive, but also empowering people's well-being. And the magic of that, again, isn't anti-productivity, but it's about sustainability, regeneration, like having a regenerative workforce where people can have like moments of deep, challenging stress, because sometimes work is just hard, but also they can resource. You can resource and you can regenerate one another so that you can sustainably keep working hard and keep making impacts without burning out or disengaging. And that's actually, it's better. And it's going to be more important because it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to start a business. And so if you're not one of the big 7 companies in the world who just have enough capital and they give people enough status, because if you get to work there, then like you get to feel really important. Those companies can afford to not necessarily treat their people the best, because they can burn through people, because there will always be highly talented people that want to work there. But if you're not one of those 7 companies, then if you want to attract top talent, even if in this future where we have smaller teams, you're going to need top talent. You're going to need really talented people. And if you want to be able to attract them, millennials, their prioritization for how they look for jobs, work-life balance, skill development, then salary. So you're not just going to be able to bribe people, even if you have the cash to come work for you. If there's another opportunity that has close to the same amount of cash, where they have better structures for how they actually manage and develop skills for people. And so that's the key, is like, if you actually want to be running a business, it's good business to do these practices. And it also happens to be exactly what our world needs right now for people's health and well-being to restore. Like, even just thinking about something like motivation. When you think about values, like if you spend some time just asking people, like Like, again, remind me, like, what matters most in your life right now? Like, what's going on with you? Do you know that about every single one of your employees? Do you know why they're working there? What they're really hoping to get out of their work? What most excites them? What are the things that are really like boring to them that they'll settle for doing? And what are the things that they really love most? Are you delivering enough recognition to those things? And that's important. There's these there was this study done, all kinds of these studies, but one that really stuck with me was they studied these middle schoolers, and they put them in two groups. One group, they had them journal about just like anything. Journal about whatever you want. Another group, they had them journal about what really matters most to you in your life. For you, what does like a really successful, good life look like? What is like valuable to you? What are your values? And then they watch those people. And then for the next few weeks, the next couple semesters, those people outperformed the other group that didn't journal about their values. Just one time really thinking about what matters most to you and how that relates to what you're doing at school made them better students, not just for weeks, not for semesters, but for years. So that's the sort of impact you can unlock, is people will actually want to work harder if you're structuring things in this sort of way. And so it's about sustainability, it's about regeneration, it's about you getting to like compete with the big 7 companies because you know these things. And so that's why we're having these conversations. What the hell else should we be telling people about what they can expect from this podcast and the conversations we're going to have here, Sydney?
I feel like you just told the origin story of the name Mattermore. You're like, what matters most?
That's right.
And slash, like, you and Matthew are both Matt, so you make Matts matter the most, which I just love.
I really hope that's not what we do. I hope we don't make the Matts matter the most.
Oh, this has been so much fun. What else are we doing? I mean, I'll share my intention, what I want to create here. I want to
what do we want this to be?
I want to create the platform I wish existed in the world with everything that I'm doing and everything that I'm a part of. I want to create the things that I personally wish existed that don't yet, So we're having conversations here that I believe are crucial to templating those new worlds, those new ways of being, those new ways of orienting and collaborating. I'd love to share, more of our specific like practices and practical application for, it's fun. We have so much data and information and we love talking and it's fun and we can tell good jokes and we're, have a lot of great support that way. But I think something in this platform, I'd love to share like really tangible ways that people can take all the themes we're talking about and put it into practice in their lives, in their companies, in their teams now. And that just sounds like so much fun. I don't know if we do like role play examples or whatever, but I would love to do that. I'd love to get to know our community, who's listening, who's connecting, answer their questions, just provide support. I mean, help as many people as we can. This is like a rallying call right now for our team. Like who's showing up around the fire, wanting to have a new conversation and create this cultural change within, our lives and our workplaces. And who are you? What matters to you? What do you value? What do you care about? And what's really challenging you? What are specific things in your life right now that are hard? And I also want to say too, like, I think part of Work 4.0 for me is about decompartmentalizing our identities, right? That who we are at work is different from who we are at home and who we are in this other place, or our creative self and our, relational self and our professional self are these really different beings. I want to live in a world where we're not compartmentalized. And of course we have like healthy boundaries and we're attuned and we're, able to relate in really beautiful ways and we're not, oversharing all the time or whatever that is, the fear is around that. But it's like, what's it like when our whole self is welcome to show up as we are, wherever we are, and especially at work, especially in teams where we're charged with creating, the new visions for this planet that are just like beyond our wildest dreams.
Yeah, that's a really good example of a fun question we'll get to explore with different people on the show of like, what does it look like to explore authenticity at work? Because certainly you can't do and you shouldn't do any of the things that you would do with your friends on a vacation also at work. There are different expectations, but can you also be yourself in each setting? And what does that look like? Like, what does it look like to also at least have part of who you are fully allowed to exist? It's a really interesting question of like, what does authenticity look like at work? Where are the boundaries of where that's allowed? Should there be compartmentalization? Should there not be? It'll be really interesting. I mean, ultimately, the workplace is not a family, but it is a team. And every high-performing team has effective leadership, effective coaching, effective feedback, effective skill development. And so here on this show, we're going to talk to the people that do that explore those questions of what are those effective things. The CEOs, the chief operating officers, the chief people officers, managers, behavioral scientists, the top thinkers that have studied these questions for a long time, and the people who are in the trenches trying to build systems for getting stuff done and for empowering the well-being of their people. So thank you so much for being here. If you have ideas of people that you think should be on the show, please reach out to us. If you have specific questions you want us to explore on the show, please reach out to us. If you think you should be on the show, please reach out to us. You can go to Mattermore.ai and you can learn more about what we're up to, and you can message us from there. You can find our emails. Please communicate with us. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you. And thanks, Matt. This is so much fun.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
See you next time.
Bye, everybody. We crushed that.